Won't you lend your lungs to me? Mine are collapsing. Plant my feet and bitterly breathe up the time that's passed. Breath I'll take and breath I'll give. Pray the day's not poised. Stand among the ones that live in lonely indecision.
Good morning, James.
Good morning, Lynn.
May Day. Happy May Day. It's May 1st.
The Hood Rats were celebrating May Day in Baltimore early yesterday.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, I was when I was talking to you about doing this podcast on my way to the Asian grocer.
Mm-hmm.
I heard wafting over about 5 rows of houses. I just heard the N-word, wonk wonk, the N-word, boom boom, and I followed it. It was like I was like Solomon Kane being drawn back to darkest Africa to look for some people, right? And then I find this park that's like supposed to be for young children in the middle of suburbia, just idyllic. People, I'm sure this was a selling point. The houses literally built around this park. Half of the houses are fenced away from the park. The other half of the houses share an alley with the park. It had to be a selling point because it's just a beautiful little park, baseball diamond and everything. It's the park where I set Sam's battle with the 2 muggers and 4 ruthless whores.
Yeah.
Okay? You know, where he fights them with the head of the 2 whores. Well, I get over there, and when I first saw this park, there was a couple little pale-faced kids running around in this park playing with some doting parents. I get over there, and it's a party with a boombox and a karaoke thing. Both ends of the alley are blocked off. The people coming home from work can't even get home. These aren't even residents, these people that are there. They're just people that know this park's there. It's their ghetto escape party. Seen these before. This is supposed to be a birthday party.
Did you say yesterday? That's Monday?
Yes. This is Monday. This is Monday, like 4 in the afternoon, 5 in the afternoon.
Wow.
It had already been on for a while.
It's not even summer break or anything.
It went on until dark. I decided to make an adventure out of the evening when I realized that all the recent immigrants, courtesy of the Federal Housing Authority, into this area were going to be out and about, and there was going to be muggers and little baby gangsters and everything running around. I decided to take a 3-hour walk. It's ended up in a weird little adventure that almost became very violent. But the comic part was the party for this child that's less than 5 years old, and there are some children his age, but it's predominantly adults and older children there. They're 5 to 50, and they're playing gangster rap very loud. And you wouldn't be able to watch your TV inside if you're in one of the neighboring places. And there's this big dog that's just looking at them and just whining through the fence, like, why must this continue? And eventually, there was 3 mud sharks, okay, with a whole bunch of chocolate people, and there was like 3 little cinnamon babies on hips there, okay. And the mud sharks were really disgusting with artificial red hair. It was really hilarious. Malformed. There wasn't a single good-looking person out of like 40 of these people that were in this park. And there's this old ghost person is walking into the park. This is a senior citizen, and I can't tell if it's male or female, and they're escorting this little pale-faced boy that wants to come to the park and run around. And you could tell the look on their face as this old person holds their hands together as, oh, this is not good. I shouldn't go here, but I must follow little Johnny into hell. And then when the little pale-faced kid gets there, and these adult people that they just literally came out of the ghetto. I can tell by the dress, the way they walk, the way they talk, and the fact that the F word and the B word and the N word was just everywhere in the conversation and being yelled and in the music. And finally, she was a very dark-skinned lady who actually had some maternal instincts, while one of the fathers, I presume, was rapping about bitches and hoes and stuff like that. She said, "This is a baby's party. There should be some baby music on." So somebody puts on a recording from this PBS show that my youngest son, to my horror, used to watch with this big gay purple dinosaur.
You know,
Okay,
yes, I know that.
and this big gay purple dinosaur is talking about, I love you, you love me, we're a
Yeah,
perfect
I
family.
know that song, yeah.
Okay, and that's when the dog started to bark and howl. Previously to the gangster rap, this black German Shepherd had just been whining, but when Barney got on there, he started barking and howling as if in protest.
You know what I know about Barney, that I'm pretty sure this is true, but listeners, by all means, fact check me, that the guy inside the Barney suit was a black man, and that people could tell, people who watched Barney, black people would like say, hey, the way that dinosaur dances, I think it's a brother in there. And they were right. I saw that on TV. I don't remember what it was, but I think it's true. I think it was primarily a black actor or dancer inside that Barney suit.
Well, I know Charles Barkley hated Barney. Charles Barkley was like, the best, most upstanding NBA player ever, and he said a lot of negative things.
He was my favorite. I never knew he hated Barney, but I used to watch NBA in those days actually, and loved.
He's only marginally tolerant of the opinion of frails.
That's all right.
And he actually did a Saturday Night Live skit where he played basketball with Barney and was like ripping Barney's eyes out and stuff.
I missed that.
So I thought of Charles Barkley. I wish Charles Barkley would have been there to tell all
driven
these people
up in his.
Get the hell home. Show your kid how to read. And stop working at the park at 4:30 in the afternoon on a school day.
On
some of these kids, I mean, it was, and some of them were school-age kids, and so. Anyways, that led me to an adventure. I decided to just go walk around and look and see what was going to go down, and try to time it. So I got back to the Sissy Rich residence at exactly nightfall, and I was a little bit behind, and I was worried I had forgotten to take a knife because it was just going to be a daytime stroll.
What?
Yeah.
James.
It was just, this place, this area I live in, even that little slice of the ghetto there is totally safe during the day. Okay.
I just can't believe. I'm just surprised the violence guy would leave the house.
The violence guy, he did you proud. I noticed, I was walking back through the alleys, okay, and I noticed in the very same alley next to where the park was, where the party was, which had now broken up, and there was just some people smoking dope in the park, there was a broken sledgehammer. It had been splintered diagonally below the haft candle, so it was out by the trash. So I picked that up by the haft. It would have been a very serviceable weapon. And I ended up, a guy ended up following me. I don't know if he was detailed to follow me by somebody else. And I walked back through the alleys as much as I could because I was afraid the cops were going to see me walking around in this prime breaking and entering area at night with his sledgehammer. But I didn't see any cops at all. And then I heard fast feet in this one alley behind me. As I got out onto the street, I looked behind me, and there's a person. My range vision isn't real good, especially at night anymore. So I don't know what their race is. I'm not sure their gender, although I think male or in the process of some kind of transmutation. Yeah. And it was smoking a crack pipe, and it had a fitted hat, a large baggy shirt on, and cargo shorts and sneakers in uniform. And I stop and look over my shoulder, and the creature sees that I have the sledgehammer in my hand, and it says, "I'm good. I'm all right." Then I start walking along, and he's following me 2 paces behind and 3 paces out. He's right on the other side of the cars. Every time I stop and look at him, he stops and refuses to walk ahead of me, and he's much quicker than I am. Okay, I was having some trouble with my hip, and I'm carrying a sledgehammer, and I'm old, so this guy could have easily bypassed me. Refused to. He pretended to be reloading his crack pipe every time. I stopped and looked at him. Then, as I'm crossing the mouth of the last alley to come up on this shopping center that's the back of a shopping center where they have lesser businesses, and it's lit over there, and I'll cross this alley and then cross this other side street, he now seems to want to approach me and confront me because he's already said during one of the stops, I just need something from you. And I stop at the mouth of the alley, and then he gets ahead of me, like he's going to prevent me from getting to the shopping center where it's well lit. At this point, I'm really worried that there's a gun or something because he can see that I'm armed with this, pretty fearsome looking thing, and I'm bigger than he is. I know I'm bigger than he is. And I look at him over my shoulder, and I just say, well, the hell with it. If he follows me, I'm slinging this thing into his guts, and then I'll be on him. And I heard a footstep. I look behind me, and he started to step into the alley, and I look over my shoulder at him again. And then he asked this question, not of me, but it seemed like of some imaginary friend. He asked this question, the alley? Okay. And then he answered it as if he was another person, like this guy was schizophrenic. And he said, oh, fuck, no, fuck that. And he just ran towards the shopping center, sucking on this pipe that was like glowing like a will-o'-the-wisp. So it was a really weird experience. And then I got out of that area and I walked through the alleys in another neighborhood and eventually got home to the rich residence. And
okay, well, I have a question about that. So if you're walking along and you want to get home and now you're being followed and it's strange and suspicious, then of course I would feel like, oh man, I really want to be at home now, but then you don't really want that guy to know where you live, right?
Right.
So you have to go, is that why you were going to the shopping center first?
No, he thought I was heading towards the shopping center. He didn't think that I was going to take another alley after he followed me down a dark alley, and he tried to catch up with me.
Yeah.
This guy made tracks because I had looked around. I had done 180s on both sides a few times approaching the alley that he followed me into. So this guy saw me at a certain point and bolted after me. And actually came after me to overtake me. So, yeah, at some point, if you're trying to get home, you have to turn on him. Or if you're a woman, you should call ahead to, make sure that, whatever Cro-Magnon creature that you hopefully live with is waiting with a battle axe or something to overtake this guy before you get to your house. So if you're a non-combatant, you need to call ahead for assistance and try to get there in the most visible way, like go through the shopping center, walk on the main street, walk on the median of the primary street. I was walking not even on secondary streets. I was walking on side streets and in alleys. The reason why I walk in alleys is so that the cops won't see me. And if I get attacked, the main danger is that I'm going to be on film hurting somebody. Now, so many people in suburban neighborhoods that are being overtaken by car thefts and breaking and entering and street muggings, they have these cameras in their windows that are attached to their smartphones. One dude even saw on film, I think it was his wife getting killed at home. He knew that his wife was being killed because he could see he was at work and he could see these thugs on his smartphone feed busting in his front door when she was at home. That happened in Baltimore City last year. So what's going to happen if I get attacked on the street immediately? Anybody that attacks me, as soon as I begin to prevail, they're calling the police. The police is their rescue team. It's totally that way now. I mean, it's an absolute. I just talked to a doctor today who actually had to take down this outlaw biker, tried to pick a fight with him by banging on his window at a stop while he was headed to surgery. And Dr. Dredd got out and he's like, look, that's not nice. Don't bang on my window. Okay. Be nice. And the guy tries to hit him and he puts this big giant hairy faggot in a wrist lock and takes him to his knees. And then the guy takes down his license plate number, 6 lawyers on him. This is a guy that belongs to an outlaw motorcycle club, and finds out he's a martial arts instructor and he's a surgeon, and they're going to take him for the whole bank because he twisted this guy's wrist that outweighed him by 200 pounds and was 20 years younger than him. Okay, so this is where we're at right now. So I'm in the alley. So if I've got to grease one of these faggots, that there's no witnesses, and there's more importantly no camera, because you have a lot of stockade fences in these alleys, which aren't a good idea defensively for the people that live in the houses, because their yard becomes a death trap for them if somebody gets over that fence, and it becomes concealment for burglars that are coming in. But for me, being a piece of white trash, trying not to get blown down this alley any quicker than I want to, then that stockade fence provides me with cover.
Okay, that's good to know.
From potential cameras, if people have parking pads in the alleys wherever you live, in suburbia or
We don't have
urbia,
that. No.
okay, they're going to have cameras there once the neighborhood starts to go
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
Because before the neighborhood actually goes bad, they've already suffered car theft.
We
And
have
then,
our older neighborhoods do not have alleys. Only really new high density developments have alleys where everybody drives into the back. But for the most part, we don't have alleys. But the cameras are everywhere. Yes, that's already true. Yeah.
yeah, they're not, alleys are not safe unless you're a hunted animal, okay, that has the capacity to fight back. Alleys
Yeah.
are bad places for ladies to be.
I won't be
Okay.
there.
Okay, no alleys for you.
No alleys, no. We have a very limited number of places we go. I mean, it's kind of sad actually, but that's the way it is.
Well, it's not the Orc Park, is it?
No.
Okay. You don't have an Orc Park?
We do have
Where
orc
they
parks.
sing and dance and cavort?
I would have to drive. It's a little bit of a hike for me to find that kind of event, but I know where I could find it. But we have parks. Our parks are sometimes full of youths, in which case we find our way elsewhere. It depends on the character of the kids that are there, you know. And then sometimes with like bums or homeless that probably are mostly harmless, and if they stay on the outskirts, we don't leave. But you know, if it's a small park, then I'd rather be somewhere else.
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, I'm so glad that I didn't do anything to take us off topic. Thank you. Thank you very much.
We like to have a Harm County Crime Surf update.
Hey, the Harm City Hood Rats are going to hit 100 before summer. They are on pace to duplicate their world championship run, despite having less targets and less shooters and conquering and invading Baltimore County at the same time. Okay, I'm here to announce that today. I'm excited. 92. Last time I checked, 92.
And you say you don't follow professional sports, and look at you all excited. Yeah, well, that's interesting. I call you the crime surfer because you are perched on this wave that's coming over the county, right? So that's my new name for you. I'm trying to push that.
Can I use that for a title of a book?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. And maybe we can have you publish that book, Lynn.
All right. Well, we can. That's business. We'll talk offline.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, but what I wanted to talk about. What?
Crime Surfer. Plug it now.
Crime Surfer. Look for it in 2019. I don't even know what it will be about.
It's already written. I'm just going to change the title and send it to you. Okay, so don't worry about it.
All right, but this is what I want to talk about, actually, because we were talking a little bit yesterday about books and publishing and stuff, and the way that a normal writer does this is that they spend like a couple years writing a book, working really hard, and then they have an editor, and that editor like makes them write the book again, basically. You know, you have to change all these things, and then they finally get published. Then they go on a book tour, and they go for all these interviews and appearances, and it's like everybody understands that you wrote one book, and here's what the book is about, and it's really interesting, you want to read it. But this is not what you do. You write dozens of books, and people show up to your website, and they don't really know which books are which, and you write fiction and nonfiction, and so I think what we need to do is focus on one book at a time from time to time. And for some reason, I chose Twerps, Goons and Meatshields for today.
Wow. Okay, that's great. Relatively speaking, I'm only a goon in limited circumstances, like in the alley last night. I graduated from Twerp to Meatshields some time back.
Okay, so. But those are my first questions. What is a twerp? Tell us. You got to define these terms one at a time. What's a twerp? What's a goon? What's a meatshield?
Okay. And this is in terms of stick fighting. Okay. Fighting with blunt weapons. So this is where, and I based the title kind of on Twerps, Goons, and Bloodthirsty Babes, which was in the logic of steel, because these were basically the three types of knifers. The Twerp is a dude that needs the weapon. Okay, so this has not changed from knife to stick. Okay, the Goon is the guy that doesn't need the weapon, but he's using it anyhow. Okay, so, okay, and the meat shield is in addition to this concept for the blunt weapons, because the meat shield in a knife thing, it's the meat doesn't help you with blades. It's a big difference with blunt weapons. So the
Can I read a quote on that topic?
Sure, sure.
This is from Twerps, Goons and Meatshields, page 50. Fat opponents will tend to engulf the stick with their blubber. To prepare for punishing big boys, the heavy bag is perfect as you practice ripping through soft tissue with a blunt object. Is that what you're talking about?
I like that. Yeah. So that's your goon. Your stick fight. That's your goon. Your predatory fat boy with a stick. Okay. You know, you wouldn't be anywhere near this guy if it was a wrestling match. All right. So that's your goon. Your meat shield is my regular sparring partner. Now, Eric is like a perfect example of the incredibly dense musculature of the meat shield. And the fighters, these different types of fighters have different timers as far as their exhaustion goes. The goon, the fat dude, will have a surprising amount of stamina as long as he's got baseline conditioning and he's relaxed. Okay, because all that fat's accessible and used for low intensity, long term waddling around, laying on people, pushing people, you know, whatever you fat fuck do to us little people. Okay, so that works. And
from carrying around all that weight, you have extra conditioning all the time too.
Yes, and you make the other guy carry it, do the George Foreman on him. Now, the Twerp, energy-wise, is like a super goon. You know, the Twerp generally can just like go forever, okay, but doesn't tend to get a whole lot of benefit out of trying to do powerful things. So the power game's not there. Now, the goon's got power. Now, the meat shield, this is a guy, the muscle guy. I love fighting muscle guys, okay? But so this is a guy that's going to be very powerful and strong, and he looks indestructible, but all that meat bleeds, okay? The fat on the fat boy, on the goon, that's like a glaze. There's a lot of nerve endings that propagate with fat expansion, okay, because that's in the skin, but you can't bleed them. You can't bruise them through that fat. Fat doesn't bruise. The muscle guy, you can bruise him and bleed him all over his body internally with the blunt object. And the other thing is a muscular guy is going to be used to using his strength. And this is a guy that, because you can see all these lovely muscles, he's got a lot of white muscle tissue, which is powered by glycogen, which is stored in the muscle, and it's a limited store. Where the Twerp and the goon, they're running mostly off of fatty acids, and they can go for a long while. So the meat shield's their victim. From both of these types, that they know what they're doing, can victimize the meat shield. So when I had Brian Jules sparring with Eric the other day, Eric took one step back. Eric is just wearing this guy out, beating this little dude up in the sparring. It was light, friendly sparring. And then at a certain point, Eric took this telltale sign back when there was no reason to step back, because he outweighs this dude by like 100 pounds of muscle. And I said, "Get him, Brian." And Brian's like, "Huh?" I was like, "Get him. He's out of gas. He's out of gas. We don't have a gas station, all right? So don't let him eat a banana, and you're good." Just start beating him up. You know, he's done. So that's the liability. Of course, if the meat shield gets a hold of you, you know, it could be disaster time. I mean, Eric is so muscular that I blew out both of my flexor tendons on each wrist, stabbing him with short sticks. Seriously. I mean, I've been stabbing dudes with blunt objects and blunt knives and stuff for like 20 years, and then I stabbed this guy with a full lunge and like completely blew out this flexor tendon. And I stabbed him with the other one and blew that out too.
It's like Titanium Man. So it feels like you're not doing a damn thing. I mean, your stick, well, a real muscular guy, your stick will literally bounce off of him. And that's a good reason to hit car tires. To practice beating muscle guys, the Meatshields, you want to practice hitting a car tire. Something that's rubbery. Like maybe a water-filled heavy bag that's too hard to punch with your hands. Or a Wing Chun wooden dummy with like foam wrapped around it or something like that.
Well, here I want to tell you that when I started reading your website, I had no idea that people would ever do this, fight with sticks. This is like 3 years ago. But since then, I've read a number of, probably quite a lot of all your articles on sticks, and I've seen a lot of videos, and I think I get it, like the steps and the strokes and stuff. So I want to tell people that these books are really effective. This book is really clear. It's really clear. You describe which way to move your feet and hands and hold a stick and strike, and it's really makes a lot of sense. And there's so many videos that really fit together that just show exactly what you're describing. So I want to tell people if
Are the videos linked in there in the book?
I haven't noticed any links yet, but we can do that. I mean, you have your video links, and then on my YouTube channel, I also have a link to Lancaster Agonistics and some other training videos of yours as well. So
okay, great.
Yeah, so there are a lot of videos, and they just show exactly what's described in the book for if anybody actually wants to try this.
Oh, cool. Well, I think it really feels good hitting someone with a stick. And if it's something that squirms or screeches or grunts or groans or growls, it's even better.
Oh.
Okay? But hitting anything with a stick just feels good. I miss it. I haven't done it, and I haven't hit anybody with a stick for like 3 days. So I'm jonesing.
Oh, jeez.
Right, I'm jonesing for a sparring partner. I will be hitting a reek with a stick in 4 hours.
All right. Countdown. So I just want to make that comment because if I can kind of understand it, then certainly an athletically inclined person looking for a combat art will be able to figure it out also. If you're not in the Baltimore area, and if you are, you should go let James hit you with a stick.
Cool. And hit James with a stick.
Oh,
he won't mind.
All right.
The best thing about stick fighting is to get really good at it does not involve dressing up in Asian uniforms. It does not involve bowing to people and pretending like you're David Carradine pretending to be a Chinese monk. None of that stuff. You don't have to dress up like a samurai. You don't have to scream and say Kiya. You don't have to do anything of that.
You don't have to take a deep stance like a ninja.
No, this is, I mean, it could help sometimes if it's a real big fat guy on you and you're stabbing him with both hands on the stick, then that might work, okay? But it's the caveman's art, and I really love it. I was talking to my doctor friend today, and he was talking about how stereotypes exist for a purpose because they're all true. And he said, for instance, I'm an orthopedic surgeon, and the stereotype of orthopedic surgeons is we are the Neanderthals of surgeons. We're bone mechanics. We're just putting stuff back together. We want to cut on you and slap you back together, and that's it. We don't want to have to deal with all this complicated medicine and everything. And he said that's the case. So, and I think there's no accident that this man's a stick fighter. That he showed stick fighting is his favorite thing to do.
It keeps his practice busy.
Yeah.
Cracking bones.
I knocked one of his thumbnails off like an hour before he had surgery one time. I felt really bad. He's like, "Don't worry about it. I'll be fine."
He doesn't use his thumbnail in the. Oh, geez. Well, you've talked about him before. He has high pain tolerance.
It's got insane pain tolerance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this guy gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning all winter long, and he puts on a jock strap and goggles, and he goes out into the Chesapeake Bay and swims in the dark in the wintertime in the Chesapeake Bay.
That's really strange.
Yeah. So the dude's like, not somebody that you could discourage.
Wow. Yikes.
So I was talking to him today about beating the shit out of bikers in the operating room and in the emergency room.
That's crazy.
It was the myth of the 20th century thing that I'm doing on Sundays about the Hells Angels. So
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I'm spending the rest of the week gathering all the accounts that I've gotten on outlaw biker people and all that. And I actually yesterday talked to a guy that prospected for the Hells Angels for a while.
Did you see that link I sent you of the Polish bikers?
No.
In Poland,
I haven't gotten emails today. So.
Oh, no, it was yesterday. It doesn't matter. But the bikers in Poland go to the priest to bless their biking season.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, because
Cool.
It's springtime, so they're getting ready to start biking again. So they had a whole bunch of them were gathered up outside, and there's a priest giving them a blessing. It was on the topic of the feminization and decline of the church in the West.
Oh, I posted the link, but I didn't read it.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I trust you implicitly, Lynn. Actually, if my readers that send me links, if they want to have a good time, you all can realize that when I post these links, if I read it like a week or two later. So you could all send like a whole bunch of James LaFond sucks links, and I would post them. And I wouldn't find out for like a week or two.
Oh, that's nice. Nice prank idea. April Fool's already went by, but maybe later.
That table scraps tag that I put up once a week, that's when I have time to entertain myself with my laptop. That's what I use. I go there and then I watch and read stuff that people have sent me. I never get to all of it, but I actually don't have time. If somebody says, I need you to read this and I want your opinion on it, well, then it becomes an article.
Right.
But if it's just like, this is of interest, I'd trust you, and then it just goes up. And probably a 30% chance I eventually read it.
Okay. Well, good to know. I'll stop sending you links.
Don't do that.
Yeah, I will.
I post them for my readers.
No. All right. So I think this book, Twerps, Goons and Meatshields, is kind of a follow-up to Modern Agonistics, right?
Yes, it is.
Yes. And we covered Modern Agonistics back before we were doing podcasts. We used to do email Q&As. So I'll link to that in the Blogspot thing. So tell me about why you needed to do a follow-up on it. Because you covered a little bit in the book at the very beginning about how you had to strip it down and simplify. So tell us about that.
The Modern Agonistics book was really just for the people in Modern Agonistics and the people that networked with us, that competed and trained with us. And it was literally just a list of skill sets. And most of the information on how you do things was methods for how we structure our training, how we structure our competition, how we make and modify our equipment, and all that kind of stuff. So you would actually, if you were interested in fighting with hand weapons, you would buy the books in reverse order. You would get the Twerps, Goons and Meatshields, which is an instructional on how to fight with the stick. And half of the Modern Agonistic stuff was all about fighting with blades, too. We go into a lot of the different types of machetes, the wooden machetes we made for practice, the different helmets and everything. With the stick, all you need is gloves, a cup, and a fencing mask. I recommend elbow pads. I fought and sparred without elbow pads for 3 years. And I found out what I needed to know, which is I could take 2 full power elbow shots and continue fighting. But the third one, I'm done. So there was no longer any reason for me to continue to get my elbows smashed up like that, because my doctor told me something could happen to the tendon attachments if I kept on getting smashed there. So.
All right. Well, that's good to know. Wear elbow pads.
It's a very difficult type of writing to write instructions as to how you physically do something. And essentially, the book as it's written could be absorbed and used and instructed out of using it as a guide if you had already fought with a stick and if you had experience coaching people. But learning out of that book alone, if you've never done it before, it's going to give you an idea of it and you'll be able to understand it and you might really be able to enjoy watching it, but you would be really well served to access some of the videos.
Yeah, it really comes together when you see the video, I think. And I'm speaking as a person with absolutely no experience or knowledge, but the two, you did a really good job. It's very hard, as you say. I know it is because I've tried it for other topics, writing these kind of really step-by-step instructions for anything. It's actually a lot of work because you don't realize how many steps there are and how to describe these things until you try to do it. So I understand that, and I agree.
Plus there's the ever-present danger as the writer that since you're writing instructions, your reader's going to fall asleep at any moment. And this is especially for somebody who writes fiction. This is like a deep horror. I would seriously rather walk down a pit bull infested alley in the dark, okay, than have to watch people read my instructional writing. Well, just because I would see people falling asleep left and right.
It's strange I know people are different, right? And there are people who really like to read reference work, and I'm one of them.
Oh.
And so it just, you get something that's really informational, and as long as it's a topic you're interested in, then it's good. And so I've already said this, but watch the videos and read the book, and you will definitely have an idea of what's going on.
That makes me feel great because knowing that somebody's falling asleep reading your stuff would be like being some asshole author's editor and sending him an important link and then realizing that there's basically a 1/3 chance he was even going to open it up. So that
when I'm spamming your inbox, which I don't do anymore. I used to do a lot.
Oh, I got hit by Jeremy Bentham yesterday. He's back.
Oh.
He's back from hunting grizzly bears.
Okay.
Wherever you're allowed to hunt them in April, and he's back just in time for the international holiday of his favorite people. Start giving the news. Well, May Day, isn't it a communist holiday?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I thought that's what but I didn't want to take the risk of guessing. I thought that's what you meant. Yeah.
Yeah, Jeremy's the most anti-communist person I know.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, good. I'm glad he's right about that. Okay, well, I didn't get all the way through Twerps, Goons and Meatshields. I'll already go ahead and confess that. But here's the reason I actually chose this book, is because a while back someone asked, and I can't remember if they asked on a YouTube video comment or what, I can't remember, but the question was that you had once mentioned that Scottish men are known for having strong hips, and they wanted to know what other stereotypes, as your good doctor friend also mentioned, what other stereotypes are out there and how much weight can you put in them? And so I think this is an interesting topic because there's probably a lot of this kind of received wisdom in Europe where these distinct types of people were distinct for a long time. But then here in America, we have different groups and we have mixing. So I want to know what you think about that, what you can say, like when you're coaching a new fighter, you can see what he's going to be good at or where he's strong or things like this.
Okay, so if you want to have a son with really strong hips, either knock up a Samoan chick or adopt a kid that's the result of a Scottish and West African crossbreeding, okay? And you're going to have a great set of hips. Actually, I trained with a few of these guys. It was like, Scottish dudes basically have like the best hips in Europe as far as I could determine.
Is that why you think they wear kilts? Because
maybe Maybe the pants cannot contain the masculinity. I don't know. I once, Mescaline Franklin and I ran into this guy. He was an older black guy, and he was delightful. He gave us the percentage of his racial breakdown and everything. He starts talking to us. This guy's in his 70s. He's flexing muscles. He says, "I live with the Jews out in Long Island now. I'm like their pet Negro." The guy was like a college football player or something like that. And he's like, "Look at these hips. This is 30% Scottish, I'll have you know." He says, these aren't Negro hips. He says, "I don't have a bubble butt." He said, these are Scottish hips. He was hilarious. And he points across the street out of the Barnes and Nobles at this bug man, soy boy, following his hipster woman behind, and he said, look at that sissy white boy." He said, "Can you believe that? How can you let your young men be like that?" I was like, "Dude, we're not allowed to beat them up." He's like, "Huh?" He's like, we beat the shit out of our youngins." He was just a fantastic guy. I mean, but anyways, so great hips. That, as far as one for stick fighting, the gigantic cranium is not a good thing in stick fighting.
Is it a target?
Boxing it is. In boxing, it's great to have a big fat head. But the problem is with stick fighting is that whatever you're wearing to protect your head, because no head can really take these stick blows, a larger head will stress the headgear in various places. And if you get hit in that place, and it's a focus hit, it doesn't even have to be that hard. Like Oliver had his big West African Irish head jammed into this fencing mask, and Charles just gave him a light rap on the head, but Charles's timing was perfect, and his head just blew up like a big knot right there. So the real big head in stick fighting is not a good thing. You want a big neck relative to your head. So ideally for stick fighting, you had this little pin head and this really big, thick, like Polish quality neck. Okay, that would be ideal. So if you could put like a lightweight Irishman's head on top of a Polish neck, that would be like the perfect stick fighting neck and head structure. Okay?
You're going to build like a stick fight Frankenstein.
Right.
Robbing graves all across the world.
Right, and actually guys with round West African heads have a hard time taking headshots in stick fights when they're wearing gear, because the way their head is so round, the fencing masks are really designed to accommodate these angular French and Spanish heads.
That's really interesting. Right. Yeah, that they need. I'm sure there's not a sufficient market, but you could actually customize, the shape and size of those things.
Right. So that's and really big guys are in danger of concussions in stick fighting. The more you weigh, the more danger there is of a concussion, because the headgear can put extra torque on your neck. And if you get caught with a stiff arm, which is a checking hand, if you get caught with a stiff arm while you're wearing a helmet, then the stiff arm hand gets a lot of traction. And if you happen to be stepping into it, and if you're fighting smaller dudes, you step into their stuff a lot because they're quicker than you, then you can get real bad concussions. Corey had to stop stick fighting because Brett, who weighed like 120 pounds, when he was fighting Corey, and Corey weighed like 390, Brett gave him a really disastrous concussion in a stick fight with that size differential. A lot of it had to do with the headgear never really being able to accommodate a head that big and the additional body weight. So you goons need to be careful out there when you're dealing with evil little twerps. Your extra body mass can get you in trouble. As far as hands go, hand size, it's not a racial thing as far as I can tell. I don't know what determines it. Maybe I'll ask my orthopedic surgeon, Neanderthal buddy, about it. But I know guys of all races that really have huge, thick hands, and I know guys of all races that have little girl hands. And so this is an individual thing, and it's the first thing that if you get into a bare-knuckle fight situation and you got a guy that's going to take care of you, the first thing he's looking at is your hands, because it's your tool and it's your weapon. Okay, so he wants as big a hand as possible to apply more weight to the enemy brain, and he wants a more durable hand. The biggest hands I ever knew belonged to a guy named Israel Flood, and he had a lot to say about racial anatomy.
Oh, really?
He would put together Frankenstein girls when we had conversations. One time I was working on an aisle with him, and he was a sharecropper when he was 14. And I'm using his real name, and I'll see if I can do an Israel Flood imitation. We both looked down the aisle, and Lisa, this is overnight. She's the overnight cashier, a beautiful blonde. She was about 5'8", and she was a small upper body and real big legs and hips. And she was bent over at the waist, picking candy out of a tote to stock on the shelf. And at the same time, Flood and I accidentally happened to look down the aisle and see her bent over there. And I knew Flood had always said disparaging things about white women. Didn't like white women at all. Okay, he said, people should stay with their own. It's unnatural to be mixing stuff up. Okay, so I look down the aisle and I look back at Flood, and he's still looking, and I look again. I said, "So you like that, Flood?" And he said a thing that made me almost break my rib laughing. He said, "Oh, I like me that little butt." And Lisa's butt was like 38 inches wide. Her butt barely fit in the register lane. She was horrified at her rear end. She was so embarrassed to find out that we were looking at her butt. She was just she was really horrified that she had such a big butt. But to Flood, this is where Flood and I could meet in the middle as far as women goes. To Flood, that was at the bottom of his range, and for me, it was at the top of my range. So we actually agreed on that. But so talking to old black guys are great because they're all natural fight trainers, because they look at people and they pick them apart and they say, well, he got some American Indian in there. Look at that big fat head he's got. Or, he's got some Scottish in him. Look at them hips. He must be some Irish because he's dumb as shit. And he's got that little pinhead, So this is the kind of conversation that happens between old men and young men when they're involved in fighting sports. And I've been in a boxing gym and have a black guy tap me on the shoulder and say, "Nice long arms for a white dude, man. Good." So it's one of the only politically incorrect places where you can still go and be a man is in some kind of combat sport. Where you have to realistically say, look, that head's going to cause you trouble, or, what's up with your ribs, dude, or, sorry about the T-Rex arms, but, I recommend knife fighting and not boxing. You ought to learn to kick. So you have to be brutally honest about people's
traits, physical.
Yeah. Because this is what you got to base what they're going to be practicing around. You want to base it around their strengths and their weaknesses. And, sometimes it could get into just fun comical conversation about if I was slave master of planet Earth, I definitely would have bred the Klitschko brothers with the Williams sisters, the tennis stars. Okay.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah. So I make my own monster of combat athletes. So you could also have a lot of fun with that kind of stuff.
Goofing around. Yeah, that would be a kind of a nightmare.
Actually, I watched Vladimir Klitschko fight one time, and I was with my good friend AJ, and she was kind of horrified of these big hulking ultra masculine guys. Okay, and she saw a picture of Vladimir Klitschko with his wife, who's this little petite
like a
thing.
midget, yeah.
She said, "Oh my God! Oh, I hope he doesn't get her pregnant." Oh my God!
Yeah, they've had at least one. Yeah.
Yeah. She said it's going to be like giving birth to an alien. He should have married Sigourney Weaver.
I think that there is a danger. I mean, this is it's just a hypothetical, but I think you have to be careful when you're hybridizing. Like a person, a dog breeder or a horse breeder will tell you, you can't just cross these really distant breeds and expect a good result every time. You're going to have.
Very often you get the worst of both. That's why people are so ugly in Baltimore. Okay? This is true. Everybody every poor slave girl in Virginia that got knocked up by her white master, it seems like they must have fled to Baltimore to get away from the mistress so they wouldn't be skinned alive when the old man died. And I think they all ended up founding their ugly broods in Baltimore. Baltimore's like the ugliest city on the planet. You could see 100 people and not see a good-looking person. It's ridiculous. And actually, a lot of it has to do with interbreeding. In Baltimore, I've worked in the supermarket where literally everybody was related to each other that worked there, and they came from all over Baltimore City. Everybody was somebody's cousin. I'm like, seriously? Am I going to meet? Cece is like related to 50 of our employees, and they come from all over Baltimore. Yeah, and then that's even with their limited ability to keep track.
Yeah, I was going to say
their maternal line, because most of them have no idea the patrimony at all.
And it gets complicated because they're probably the generational distance is kind of short too. So you can have people who seem like cousins, but maybe they're uncles or who knows.
Yeah. So it's anyhow, as far as the heads go, okay, Mexicans and Asians have the best heads for boxing. Okay, because not only are they big and fat, they don't have real sharp features. And by Mexicans, I'm not talking about conquistadors. We're not talking Spanish trade here. They're close to Irish as far as the way their heads and everything come out. The problem is with heavy-headed Europeans, like the Klitschkos, for instance, is you get a lot of angular features and a lot of bone mass. Unless you come out looking like a Neanderthal hybrid, like Valuev, you'll tend to cut a lot. White guys cut more largely, not because their skin is thin, but because their features are too sharp. So people with a lot of Asian ancestry tend to do really well with not getting cut so much and being able to take a lot of head trauma. And really, there's so many with the West African head for boxing is the next best thing to the Asian head, but you see more cutting. They'll cut more, and I have no idea why. As far as the durability of fighters taking punishment to their thoracic cage, that number one is Asian, number two is Caucasian, dead last is people of African heritage, unless they're really massive people. If it's a guy that's lean, that's made weight for a fight, lower leg injuries and elbow injuries and rib injuries they're way up there with black boxers, for instance. Okay, you got to be really careful with that. Everybody seems to be equally plagued with the lower back injuries, except for the Asians and the Mexicans, and that could have as much to do with height as anything, because most of the Asian fighters I know of are like short guys.
I feel like that I have seen the worst back injuries in people with long torsos. Like each vertebrae is bigger.
Well, if I was 6'4", I would virtually be a cripple right now with what I've done in my life and everything and the back injuries I've had. But I have the same number of vertebrae as Ishmael, and this guy is towering over 6 feet tall. Right. So that means he's got more space between his vertebrae.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty common hazard for the tall guys. Everybody seems to be equally inclined to shoulder injuries. Yeah, so the racially, there doesn't seem to be any benefit as far as the shoulders go. Low back strength is European. I mean, and I guess the group that seems to like have all the strengths and none of the weaknesses is Polynesians. That's it. And if you look at how many Polynesians there are, you could take all of Oceania and you could put them in Philadelphia, and they probably wouldn't even fill up, one section of Philadelphia. Yet they're pretty heavily represented in some sports, particularly football, and in a variety of positions. So that's like if you're a fight coach, having a Polynesian fighter is like the dream guy, and it's almost like you got some magic bullet there as far as muscular development for combat.
Homo erectus.
Right. So they've always done great as military guys.
Yeah.
and rugby and football players. It's huge for them. As far as weight classes go, the main thing is the group that supersizes the best are the Caucasians. Black dudes will get just as big, and Asian guys will get just as big, but it just seems to get uglier at that size, where you'll have a guy that's really good for pushing. You'll have really huge black linemen and sumo wrestlers. Emmanuel Yarborough was the biggest sumo wrestler ever. He was a black dude from New Jersey. So you kind of get, once you get over 260 pounds in shape weight, really, unless you're some kind of Caucasian mix, you tend to get pushed off into really the pushing sports, where your body mass and your forward leg strength counts a whole lot. But it makes the heavyweight class interesting in boxing, because you've got the black guys tend to be best fighting around 240, and that's about the ceiling, but they don't supersize up to 260 very well.
Here, okay, I want to ask you about wrestling, because we made a new friend on YouTube, and he asked you why Pennsylvania dominates in wrestling, and you wrote some kind of hypotheses on that. But what makes a good wrestler in terms of body type or other traits or characteristics?
Number one is starting young, so that you have tendon strength. I actually trained with a guy who had 700 shoots. He had 700 competitive wrestling matches, and he had been doing it since he was 5 years old. He was also a better boxer than me, too. And it was a real ego check dealing with this guy. Bench press 500 pounds, moved quicker than me. And then when he grabbed me, when we were doing a disarm drill and he grabbed me, he could have snapped both of my forearm bones between his hands. I mean, I can do that with a 120-pound woman. I could just, because I have Popeye forearms, I could take a small person that's under 130 pounds and I could grab their wrist and I could break them just by squeezing. This guy could do that with me, and I had a hypertrophied forearm for my size. Okay, I'm actually, from the elbows down, I'm a really good combat athlete. So it's like being grabbed by a piece of machinery when you're dealing with a guy that wrestled from age 5 up through college, and that's why these guys have consistently made excellent MMA champions. That really starts from being young. They're also tend to be from a rural background. For some reason, wrestling doesn't thrive in big cities and suburbia. It thrives in small towns. So you have guys that from a young age are doing physical work around the house. I actually got in a fight when I was 15 with a 19-year-old farm boy that was on the way to his job to bale hay. And I found out what that meant, to do that for a living when you were a teenager, compared to me punching bags and lifting weights. This guy was a lot stronger than me. He was a little bit bigger than me, but he had really strong hands and he had really strong forearms, and that makes a big difference even when you're punching somebody, to prevent from damaging yourself. Hips are a big deal. I never would have been a good wrestler because I was a narrow hip guy. I was kind of designed to be somebody that fought with weapons or punched. The work ethic is, and the years put in. So wrestling is basically the work sport. You have to have a huge work ethic. You have to have a lot of discipline to be able to lose weight. You have to start early and stick with it. I wrestled for 2 years, and it was just, I wasn't naturally suited to it as much as some other guys were. But importantly, I didn't start when I was 5 years old. I was so far behind when I started at age 11 that it was just too depressing. I spent every session, every match, I never got pinned because I was really strong for my weight and I was wrestling at a low level. But I spent every match eating the mat the entire time. I'd spend 6 minutes pancaked on my face every wrestling match I was in, because I just didn't have all that baseline experience that comes from a young age. And it's really important in any combat sport, if you can begin it, or any sport really, if you can begin before you hit puberty, attain a high level of flexibility, conditioning, and a skill set, and continue doing it through puberty until your adulthood, then you're basically like a superhero. You're a super soldier. Nobody else can compete with you that hasn't gone through that.
I think that's something that people don't realize, which when you were talking about like the soy boy at the bookstore or whatever, that if you miss that window of training, you don't really get it back. And I mean, obviously you can't get it back, but if you are working or training or doing something during childhood and growth periods, it makes a difference. I wanted to say when I was in school, there was a family, and they were really good at wrestling. All the boys were wrestlers, and their dad had been. So I think it's something that, probably dad had started them when they were tiny and kept them going. So I think that makes a lot of sense for that.
When White Working Class gave us that question, what I immediately started going for articles, because there's an army of wrestling geeks out there on the top wrestling states. I didn't realize that Pennsylvania has been the number one wrestling state for a long while. It might have been overtaken by Illinois this past year, I think. But I always knew it was in the top 5. Everybody in Pennsylvania always told me, we're always in the top 5. And when I looked at the states that were in the top 10 in the United States, these were all states that were, you go New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois. These are all top wrestling states. That's the migratory corridor for people who either escaped slavery or worked themselves free or were emancipated, who were of Irish, Scottish, and later German backgrounds. It was those German Rhinelanders was the last and smallest group. The mid group was the Scottish, and by far the huge group were the Irish. So you had this one little subset of Germanic Catholic people, and then you had Scottish people who were Catholic and Protestant, and then you had these Catholic Irish people, and they all migrated along the same corridor down the Ohio River, and maybe some of it's genetics, maybe some of it is just culture. And then the other strong wrestling states intersect with this around the Great Lakes, and that's where we received Swedish and Norwegian immigration in the 1800s. And we can't forget that wrestling is something that every culture does. Every primitive culture has a wrestling tradition. It was very strong amongst American Indians, amongst Native Americans. So there was a lot of mixing between Native Americans and these Irish, Scottish, and later Germanic people and the English people. And England was very strong for wrestling. So just that early Eastern Woodlands mixture of people that all had wrestling traditions, one of the first things that people did when Native people and immigrants got together in Plantation America was actually have wrestling matches and running races. And I mean, it was one of the first things that happened when Pizarro met Atahualpa at Cajamarca. I think this was before he had the bastard burned alive and melted down with his gold and silver.
Atahualpa.
Okay, thank you. You like my pronunciation. So Alonso Diaz was the Spanish wrestling champion, and he defeated the Inca wrestling champion. And this was a common thing. If you were trying to make an alliance and you wanted to get along, then this is a way where the men could compete with each other, not kill each other. It's the reason for wrestling. And at its base, if you're picking combatants to go to war, to fight in MMA, to do anything, you're looking for people that have a wrestling background. And it helps a lot in school, too. The other thing is, in the ancient world, the professional prize fighters who had their own circuit, and it was a sacred brotherhood. Okay, it was the brotherhood of Heracles or Hercules, depending on whether or not you were Greek or Roman. They had a guild. They had a sacred guild, and the people that managed it were not the most popular athletes. The most popular athletes were the boxers and the MMA fighters, the pancratius. The people who actually ran the athletic guilds were wrestlers. Wrestlers tend to be better educated than people of their same social level who have not wrestled, and it probably goes back into the work ethic where these are people that are used to being able to do boring things for very long periods of time.
Well, a while ago you mentioned Valuev, and it reminded me of your newest fiction project with Tony Cox, sorry.
Yes, Neanderball.
Neanderball.
This is all Tony. I'm just helping him write the characters, okay? And what he writes, I add some things to it, and it's going to be a collaboration. It's going to go at his pace. I'm completely free of all the hassles of actually coming up with a interesting and believable storyline and structuring. Tony's going to decide who lives and dies. Okay.
All right.
Yeah, this is great. This is great. which is a responsibility I often don't take for myself in my own stories.
Oh.
Okay. Sometimes I'll even roll a dice to decide if somebody
Oh,
lives
really?
and dies.
Oh,
Okay.
that's good.
Yeah, because I get.
Taleb would like that. You make it
okay.
random. Yeah.
And then my part is just the art of how it happens or how it doesn't happen.
Well, I really like the first part you guys wrote, and I hope you guys stick with it.
That was about, I think it was like 800 words, and he wrote 600 and I wrote 200.
Well, it's good. I like it, and I'll probably try to link to it in the notes.
We should be working together in the flesh. We should actually be sitting in front of the same computer sometime later in the summer.
Well, we have to, whenever you're making plans this summer, please think of me and my little humble podcast that we could try to tape with those guests when you're out there.
I will, and those guys would not forgive me, okay, if we did do a podcast together, and if I don't do a podcast with you and Big Ron.
Oh, yeah.
Big Ron might take me out behind the bar. So we're going to do one with Big Ron before I leave for the summer.
Okay, good.
And then we'll make sure that the Ishmael, the Checkered Demon, C Daddy, and Tony Cox all end up on the Crackpot Podcast with their favorite voice. Okay.
Oh, or in-person guest appearances. That'll be good. I'm looking forward to it. So I think with that we can wrap it up and say that I just want to keep you and Tony on task. Because what about Sam Finlay and the Filthy Few?
I had to still do my part. That's not waiting for him.
Okay.
That's waiting for me. And I've let all my fiction drop for a couple of months.
I've noticed.
Because I'm trying to wrap up. My plan is, while I'm here and I have this library, my plan is to finish the history books. And then when I go on the road, I will finish the 7 novels that I have in the works, one of which I've been writing for 8 years, and that's just reprehensible. So I will be finishing novels in the later part of the summer and in the autumn, while I will be finishing the nonfiction throughout the rest of the spring. I hope to spam you with a whole bunch of Word files and PDFs of completed books that require your attention.
Well, I will look forward to that. We're working, the next on deck is Shelters for the Self, and a reader, Scott, did a really amazing job finding the history of the attack or landing on this place, Biak Island, which is where the diary came from and where Petty Officer Koyama probably met his end, although we don't know exactly what happened to him. And so this diary that you transcribed is now going to be presented side by side with the Allied military history of the same events. So it's going to be really cool.
I'm really thrilled at that.
Yeah.
Scott did a lot more work on this than I did. So
he did a really amazing job. Thanks a lot, Scott. And hopefully we'll get that out to the readers very soon.
Thanks, Lynn.
All right, that was a good one. That was episode 37. Wow. Episode 37, guys.
We'll meet again under the sun every 12 minutes and another one's gone. This meat's in your makeup, splashes on your lips. That's a nuclear warhead.